I'm really excited today to be talking with Dene Low, and she is also another author, and we'll talk more about kind of who she is, but I just wanted to welcome everybody here. And I had posted something about the Slow March of Light, and then you had said, oh yeah, I lived in Germany during the Cold War, and your husband had been an Army officer, so I thought, wow, that would be really interesting to hear about your experiences. So why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can kind of start with some questions as well.
Okay. My author name is Dene Low. My real name, my married name is Laura Card. So either one is good. um, we did live in Germany for 3 years back in the 70s. And it was very much an iffy situation because we were always worried that the East Germans were going to come, or the Russians were going to come over the border. And so we had a lot of military troops lined up against the border there. And the, excuse me, a lot of the talk was about what to do if the balloon goes up. I don't know if you guys use that terminology with you. But if
I heard that from Ian McGregor. He brought that up.
Yeah, and that was a big deal. And we always kept rations in our cars, the sea rations. I mean, the only one I liked was there was one little can that they had with some little bread, a cake in it, and was a pecan cake. I liked that one, but everything else was yucky. But I suppose if you were starving, you'd eat it.
Right.
But we kept that in our car, and we always had to have a map with our route mapped out of how we were going to get out of Germany into Switzerland.
Wow.
After we'd been there a little while, my husband was working at a place called Jefferson Barracks.
Okay.
And his office was there in Mannheim, that's where we were living, which is sort of toward the southern end of Germany, kind of in the middle. And he all of a sudden got a transfer to a different building. And the next week, that building got blown up by terrorists, the building that he had been in.
Wow.
So I was grateful that he got moved. And it was a very real thing for us. It wasn't just that it was hypothetical that there were terrorists out there, but no, there were terrorists. And
it's close to home for you.
Very close to home. Mm-hmm. And the Germans were worried about it too. The Polizei, or the police, would stand on the street corners with their machine guns. And it was a little unnerving because they would point the gun at your car as you drove by and just follow you. And that was kind of nerve-wracking. Another time we went, we were trying to make some friends with some people in our ward, or in our ward boundaries. So it was across the Neckar River, or no, across the Rhine River. And they were German. And we had a nice time with them. They came to our place for dinner, and we went to their place for dinner. Mm-hmm. And one time we were coming back from their house, and there was a lot of fog. And all of a sudden, this German, he wasn't dressed quite like a Polizei, more like an army person, came out. He stood in the middle of the road with his machine gun pointed at us, and said, "Halt, halt!" And my husband halted. He stopped the car. Well, here we were, with me in the front seat, my husband in the front seat, and 3 little kids in the back. Mm-hmm. I mean, our oldest at the time was about 6 or 7, and he walked all the way around the car, pointing in the machine gun in the windows, and then And then all of a sudden he goes, Rouse, Rouse, let's get out of here. And we got out of there. And about 30 seconds later, we heard machine gun fire.
Wow.
In that fog. And it was pretty scary. So it wasn't like we were in a theoretical place. It was very real.
Yeah. So you were there for 3 years. So did you have any of your children over there, or did you already they're already born when you went?
Well, the first 3 were born before we got there. We had one in the well, it was actually in Heidelberg.
Okay.
Because we lived in Mannheim, and the nearest hospital was in Heidelberg. And that was interesting because the baby was coming fast, and I was worried that we wouldn't get to the hospital in time. So my husband stopped and gave me a blessing, and I got to the hospital, and it was a former SS hospital.
Wow.
So it was not the prettiest place.
Yeah.
We got in there, and you have to realize this was an army hospital. I mean, there were almost no other women with babies in there. There were not too many.
Yeah.
And so I got an English midwife to deliver the baby. She was actually better than any doctor I ever had. She was really good. And she says, well, you're dilated, your muscles are ready. Where are the labor pains? I was like, explain to her about a blessing. So anyway, they had to give me some chemicals and get the labor started again. And then I had the baby, and she was fine. She was very feisty little baby. And then it was the army, you have to understand. So they came to get me from the recovery room, and we had to go by the nursery.
Yeah.
There are only like 2 or 3 little babies in there. You think about Utah Valley Hospital. Oh my babies, but this one they only had like 2 or 3. And there's this little baby up on its hands and knees, just rocking back and forth. And I said, whose baby is that? I mean, he said, that's yours.
Oh my goodness.
She's been a strong little thing ever since. But anyway, the funny thing about that, going from the recovery room to the ward, was that they brought in a wheelchair. They put my suitcase on the wheelchair, and they had me walk it down to the ward.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't for me to sit in. It was for my suitcase. And the next day, they had me doing PT, a physical training there. And there were 3 other women in there who were actually in the army. And they were complaining, I just had a baby. What am I supposed to do? And they said, and this is my 4th one, so I said, okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to do sit-ups now. And I said, okay. I just went sit up, sit up, sit up. And they go, what happened to you? So it was kind of funny. I said, you guys are wimps. But yeah, it was interesting. And my kids also went to military schools. So that was kind of interesting there. Although,
were you living on the military base?
Yeah.
While you were there?
Yes, we were living in the military housing. And it was all gray, and it was pretty dismal.
Yeah.
First, In fact, I had a nightmare because they started painting some of the buildings yellow, or light yellow, kind of butter yellow. And it was a pretty color. And I had a nightmare that they got to our street and stopped.
Yours stayed gray.
But it didn't. It got painted. So, but
so were you able? Did you go out in the town? Were you like interactive with the German citizens, or were you mostly on the base?
Well, we made friends with the people that family. Also, my third child was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy, very sturdy. And I used to dress him up in lederhosen.
Yeah.
He just looked so German. And we'd go on the Straßenbahn, which is the streetcar. And all the Germans would not pay attention to my two older girls because they had brown hair. But they loved that little boy. And they would pick him up and put him on their laps. There were people in the German ward who would wait after their ward was done to give him candy. And they thought that he was just marvelous. He's a little German boy. Well,
yeah.
He's a big boy.
So did you pick up German? Did you already know German, the language?
Oh, I spoke it a little bit because of my grandparents, and then it was my minor at BYU.
Okay.
And that was another reason I felt comfortable going to the stores and asking for things and getting things. I had done a Salzburg semester abroad, so I spoke German pretty well. And the culture, I mean, it usually was hard for my husband to understand because his family's all English, Scottish, British type stuff, and they're a little bit more reserved than we were. And he could hardly understand. He didn't know about the German omas, the little grandmas. They're tough. And you go into a small store, not like a department store or something, but a small store. And if you don't assert yourself, you're not going to get waited on.
Huh. Interesting.
You have to walk up to you have to push yourself forward and go, my turn,
Right.
And then you could he couldn't do that. So it was up to me to go into the store and get stuff because he could do that. And then also you learn when you're traveling how to say, how much is it if the adults stay in the beds and three little kids stay on the floor.
Yeah.
Blankets or something and sleeping bags. Or because staying in a German hotel is different. You get a breakfast and you get other stuff with it. And so it's different. But anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your husband was in the military. Are you from a military family? Is this because you had mentioned earlier to me about your grandson who's in the Navy?
Yeah. My father was an Air Force pilot in World War II.
Okay.
Army Air Corps back then. And my uncle was a pilot too. He was a cargo pilot. My dad flew bombers and also taught flying.
Wow.
In Arizona. And but he was in the German, the whole European flavor. My husband was in the military then, and we have a son who's gone into the Army, and he served in Iraq for a while. That was enough for him.
Yeah.
And we've got various people in our family have been in the military. It's kind of easy for us. When we went to what do you call that? Anyway, it was a meeting where they give a a promotion to my son. He was turning from a private to a sergeant, and so the colonel came over and he talked to us. He said, "So maybe I ought to explain this to you." And we're going, "Oh, we know about this type of stuff. We know that parade, what parade rest is. We know what, all the stuff. It wasn't weird to us at all."
Yeah.
So we do that. Oh, there's another little cute little story. My husband and I, when he was in training in southern Germany, officer training, down in a little town called Vilseck. And it wasn't an army post necessarily. It was mostly just civilian stuff, but it was fairly close to the border of East Germany. So we were down there. We had friends take care of the kids. And then we stopped for gas. We stopped for gas, and there's this owner of the gas station came out, and he goes, "Oh, why are you?" Because he saw our military plates, and he said, "Oh, so you're down here for something? Why are you here?" And we said, "Well, we're here for training, and working with my husband was working with NATO, so we get going, and he says, you wait. And he said, "And you're here for training, and then what else?" So he explained that it was our wedding anniversary. So this little man ran into his backyard, and he brought out a huge apple.
Wow.
I don't know if you've seen the apples. If you espalier a tree, that means you see it rotten, and then all its energy can go into the apple, not into the tree. Anyway, he came carrying it out like this and handed it. He says, "For you."
Wow. That's sweet.
He was happy to have the Americans there.
Yeah.
To keep the Russians away.
That is sweet.
So it was interesting when you were close to the border, the Germans were really, really, really grateful to have you there. They didn't want the Russians to come in at all.
Yeah.
But the further away you got from the border, the more irritated they would get with Americans. And I have to admit, we saw some Americans who behaved very badly. American soldiers who would walk next to each other down the street and push Germans off the sidewalk to make room for themselves, and just be really, really rude.
Yeah.
It was kind of embarrassing for those of us who could actually understand what they were saying and had some affiliation with Germans. So
yeah, that makes it hard when people that represent your countries act like that.
Yeah, it really does. Really annoying.
So we do have a couple questions. Cindy says, "This is bringing back memories of me living near Mannheim and Heidelberg in 67 and 68, and then in 74 to 75. And then she wanted to know, when you were taking German at BYU, did you have any classes from Professor Marvin Folsom?"
No.
Okay.
No, not Professor Folsom. I had, who was it? So my classes were mostly from 67 through 72, 71. Yeah, about
Okay,
then.
awesome. So also, I remember a little while, so you're a pilot too, right?
Yeah, I am.
Did you do that through the military or through school, or was that just a personal goal? Or
that was a weird thing that happened because my husband got very, very sick. Our daughter died, and it just tore him apart. and he could not handle it. He got a thing called sarcoidosis. I don't know if you know what it is. It's an autoimmune disease where small or large wart type things grow on your organs. So he still has quite a few on his skin, but it was taking over his lungs, and he could hardly breathe. And the doctors said, if this continues growing like it is, you have maybe a year to live.
Wow.
So my husband wanted to give me a present. So that Christmas, he gave me flying lessons for a present because my dad had been a pilot and he wanted me to, and I had always said I wanted to fly. So I got the flying lessons and I got my license, and it was wonderful. I mean, I was never so addicted in my life. It was so wonderful to be able to fly. And then, you know, the kids needed stuff, and life happened, and I just, and so my husband decided that I needed to do something different because he didn't think flying was safe. So, and he had his disease under control then. And the doctor started saying, well, if you're going to improve like this, you could be alive for another 30 years. And so he decided he wanted me around. And so instead of flying lessons, he bought me a motorcycle.
Oh, wow.
He loved motorcycles. And so for about 10 years, we went around did a lot of touring and bike related stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, my daughter is in flight training right now, and so it's fun to hear stories of others that have that same passion.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
She loves it. I remember when she went to do her, I guess they do some sort of test just to see if you even like doing it. And, obviously you have the co-pilot right next to you, but I'm like, wow, I just was so nervous and thinking about it. She's like, I loved it. It was amazing. I'm like, okay, then it's your personality.
Oh, yeah. In fact, the first time I went up, well, the problem is that both my dad and I have really delicate stomachs. So we both get airsick easily. And he was a bomber pilot, and he got airsick. But I was getting sick, airsick on my first time up. I was doing really well, and then all of a sudden I really felt sick, and I had to get the little airsick bag in a hurry. I mean, once I realized I was gonna throw up, he was so fast with that airsick bag, and I threw up. And then I helped him. He helped me land the plane, and he expected that to be it. And I just sat there and I breathed for a while, and I said, "When's the next lesson?" And he just went, "Really? You want to go next lesson?" Yeah.
That's awesome. So what are some of your favorite memories about living in Germany? You talked about some of the harder stuff. What are some of, like, maybe the food? Did you fall in love with the food? What are some things that you remember enjoying?
Ooh, I love the food. I mean, I grew up with German food, so
Yeah.
it was so good. And we found a couple of restaurants that really were wonderful. One was the Schwan in a few miles away from Mannheim. And boy, Americans really loved that place, but it was some of the best food in the world, and they would pile it up on the plates. But one of the most touching things that don't make me cry, because not everybody likes Americans. And it was 1976, so it was our 200th anniversary. And the Germans got big barges that they were floating down the Neckar River with orchestras on them and fireworks and everything. And we sat on the banks of the Neckar River and watched as they played the Star Spangled Banner and everything. It was really kind of cool.
Wow, that's amazing.
So every once in a while you'd find people who remembered World War II.
Yeah.
Remembered that the Americans came in and saved them and helped them rebuild their country.
Yeah.
And that really meant a lot to them.
Yeah, I imagine. So you were there when the Berlin Wall was already up. It had been up for a while. So what do you remember, like as far as hearing about it or people talking about it or people's opinions about it?
Oh, well, for one thing, we didn't go to Berlin.
Right.
You had to drive across East Germany to get to Berlin. My husband was an officer in the air defense artillery, so he was forbidden to get even close to the border. And I can remember there were times when the German signage is terrible. So trying to get off the freeway or Autobahn and into a city and then back on the Autobahn was just really a real exercise in patience. But you had to stay as far away as you could from the border. And sometimes we'd find ourselves lost. Our motto was get lost and see Germany. and then you could be within 20 miles, 10 miles, sometimes 5 miles of the border, and you had to turn around and go the other way because they did not want our American officers to be captured by the Russians.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really appreciated hearing more about what you experienced in Germany and also just more about you personally, because I know we've crossed at a couple of writers' conferences and here and there, but now we're in different states. So, but thanks so much for joining us. And if our listeners have questions throughout the next few days, we'll jump back on and just answer them in the comments as they show up.
Okay.
So thank you and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.